From Lagos, the nation's commercial capital, this is the news at 10, live from Channels Television. Reporting tonight, Amarachi Uban.
Good evening and welcome. Tonight, the Nigerian Union of Teachers insists on shutting down schools nationwide within 2 weeks in solidarity with ASU as it marks World Teachers' Day. NCAA suspends operations of Associated Airlines following the crash of its plane in Lagos on Thursday. The presidency comes into focus today as we continue our Independence Anniversary Special Report series. And Kenya's military names 4 men who took part in the Nairobi Mall attack last month.
On business news tonight, interbank rates averaged 12% this week, supported by ample dollar supplies.
And in sports news, Rafa Nadal regains #1 spot in the world after qualifying for the final of the China Open.
We begin tonight with what's happening in education. The Nigerian Union of Teachers is insisting that the union will shut all schools in the country if the federal government does not settle with the striking university lecturers within 2 weeks. President of the NUT, Mr. Michael Olukoya, gave this indication in Abuja at the NUT World Teachers' Day Symposium. His threat is coming as the federal government says it will stand with teachers in preparing the future leaders. This pledge was made by the Vice President, Namadi Sambo, at the symposium where he urged teachers to be focused on the long-term benefits of their profession. Highlights of this year's NUT Day celebration is the Award of Excellence to the governors of Kwara, Yobe and Enugu for their contribution to the growth of education in their states.
At this time every year, the Nigerian Union of Teachers gather their members to mark the World Teachers' Day. They also use the occasion to say their rewards must start from here and not in heaven alone. Goodwill messages came from the federal government. Vice President Sambo calls on them to remain focused as the administration is determined to address challenges in the sector.
The future of our nation lies on the shoulders of those in your care today, those whose destinies you are helping to shape. The theme of this year's Teachers' Day, a call for teachers, is of utmost relevance and urgency. It calls for concerted effort and renewed strategies in addressing issues of teachers' shortage, recruitment of better trained teachers, improving on the quality of education, and encouraging teachers to adapt to the dynamics of their role of developing globally minded citizens in tune with the contemporary demands and realities.
The examples of Kwara, Enugu and Yobe states in the education sector was recognized by the NUT as they took time out to honor the governors present.
We take the issue of education very seriously. Firstly, by repositioning our colleges of education that we know churn out these teachers. We ensure that the right platform for proper training.
As the teachers celebrate, their counterparts in the universities have been at daggers drawn with the federal government over issues of allowances and infrastructure development. NET here gives ultimatum to the federal government.
If in a fortnight they are still on, our students are still at home, sincerely speaking, we shall shut all the schools, primary and secondary. It is high time we solidarized to ensure that the right thing is done at the appropriate time.
I think we are meeting up with all what we have agreed with the various unions. So just be patient, be rest assured. Very soon we are meeting with ASU and Mr. Vice President. We hope by the end of the day, after that meeting, that something positive will come out at the end of the day.
The NET vowed to resist any attempt by the National Assembly to put primary education on the purview of proposed local government. One of the issues in the education sector that made them to cancel the usual ceremonial parade to mark the World Teachers' Day. Chukwuma Onwekusi, Channels Television News.
Meanwhile, the debate on how to salvage Nigeria's educational system seems not to be limited to the shores of the country anymore. This issue formed the crux of the meeting between the Nigerian High Commissioner to London and the delegation of some administrators from the Nigerian universities who are in London to understudy the running of some UK tertiary institutions. Both parties called for a quick settlement of the dispute between the federal government and the Academic Staff Union of Universities, while suggesting the best possible way to revamp the education sector.
But I don't believe government alone can fund education in Nigeria. There is no way. Our only way is the way we are going with all these private institutions coming on. I believe if government wants to be really serious, I don't think we need many more universities. Publicly owned. We need more incentive to have private universities. And then those who are running the universities know how to run them. It's just like the secondary school education in Nigeria. You go to a federal government college or state government colleges, you go there, everything is diluted. You go to private institutions, you learn very well, and the students are different.
Privatization may not be the answer because even the UK, our experience here did not start with privatization until only very recently. The UK system was private, and even now, a large portion of UK investment is still, the UK government is still putting a lot of money into education. So privatization is not the answer. The investment that is required in education is so much that the private sector in Nigeria is not capable on its own to absorb it yet.
Staying with education, underfunding has been described as being responsible for the near collapse of the sector in Nigeria. That's a view of the former Education Minister, Mrs. Obi Ezekwesili, who says the budgetary allocation to education is a far cry from what obtains in other African countries. She believes a more robust budgeting plan will help correct the dysfunction experienced in the sector. Mrs. Ezekwesili was a guest on our weekend breakfast show, Sunrise, today.
I was a minister that said, I clearly recognize, if you looked at the reform document during our time in office, I recognized, because analysis showed it, that Nigeria was underfunding education. So, for example, South Africa has 7.9% as the ratio of education budget to its GDP. Ghana was 4.4%. Even Angola was something like 4.2%. Guess what Nigeria was? Nigeria was 0.79%. Not even 1% in terms of budgetary allocation to education compared to the GDP of the country. That was what it was. So clearly we had a funding issue. But we had worse than a funding issue. We had a misallocation of investment issue. So you had a structural dysfunction of the sector. What you needed to do was to correct your dysfunction. So you needed to change the structure. You needed to change the dysfunctionality. Otherwise, as I said, you would have a well-funded dysfunctionality. And that's not what you want out of your spending. So investment in education is important. But there, in reform, you needed to understand sequencing and pace. And then you needed to define what your outcome would be. What we want for education is to get better learning outcomes at all levels of the relevant kind of education that would enable citizens not only function socially, but to be economic contributors in the development of society.
Former Minister of Education here in Nigeria, Mrs. Obi Ezekwesili. Now, away from education to aviation, the Nigeria Civil Aviation Authority has suspended the operations of Associated Airlines following the crash of its aircraft in Lagos on Thursday, which killed 13 people. The Director General of the NCAA, Mr. Fola Akinkotu, announced this during a visit to the survivors of the air mishap at the Lagos State University Teaching Hospital in Ikeja. This is coming barely 2 days after the aviation regulatory body said the Embraer 120 plane, which crashed in Lagos, was certified fit to fly and had a current certificate of airworthiness valid until October 22nd this year.
Associated Airlines, the operation has been suspended by the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority. I did not say any certification was cancelled, but I said all operations. They have certifying engineers there, they have certifying pilots, they have technical people who within the organization have certified that the airplane is airworthy. And we did not have any information contrary to that, otherwise we would have withdrawn the airworthiness certification of that aircraft. So when we were certified, we were satisfied and therefore we gave it an airworthiness certificate. The continued airworthiness certification of an airplane, the responsibility is likely domiciled with the operator. So, having said that, the certifying engineers there who are licensed and approved by the NCA did sign that the airplane was airworthy. The pilot had the responsibility to ensure that the airplane he was flying was airworthy, and he accepted it. So, to that extent, the NCA cannot say anything to the contrary as we speak.
Meanwhile, officials of Cabo Air Limited have denied reports that a Saudi-bound aircraft belonging to the organization made an emergency landing in Sokoto State. Addressing a news conference in Kano, the airline's public relations manager, Mr. Aminu Hamza, and the director of flight operations of the airline, Mr. Joseph Machimu, described what happened as just a minor incident involving loss of tires. They say the situation was quickly brought under control by the pilot, who landed the plane safely at the Sokoto airport.
The news going around that it has an emergency landing, it was a diversion, it's not true. Some were saying it was diverted to Sokoto. Actually, it was not diverted to Sokoto. The flight was meant to go to Sokoto from Kano. Then Sokoto, Jeddah. That was the routing of the aircraft.
In addition to what PRO said, the incident of yesterday happened on landing in Sokoto. The aircraft was on the landing phase, and on landing the aircraft lost some of the tires, 2 tires. And normally if you land and you lose tires, maybe the tires can break away from explode, and the debris can fly away and cause some damage to the skin of the aircraft.
In part 2, after the break, a leader of the opposition All Progressives Congress, Mr. Bola Tinubu, says call for national conference is a contradiction. That's in a moment. Please stay with us.